All right, in our first half hour, we looked at what's been happening in the Illinois legislature, and now we're turning to Des Moines. Iowa will need to use state savings to cover part of next year's fiscal budget. Every year, Iowa lawmakers are required to use estimates from the Iowa Revenue Estimating Conference to make the state budget. That conference now estimates that next year, Iowa will bring in about $400 million less than what it spent this year. The report also says Iowa will see state revenue decline by $1.2 billion over the next 2 years, mostly because of the income tax cuts that went into effect this January. So taking all of this into account, Governor Reynolds' proposed budget would need about $900 million from state reserves. Republicans say the tax cuts are working as intended and the state has enough money saved, but Democrats say it's not responsible to use one-time money for ongoing expenses. And in education news, Iowa's public schools are ready to start planning for the next academic year, but they still don't know how much money they'll be getting from the state. Saturday was the deadline for Iowa school districts to submit their proposed budgets for public input. But Republicans in the Iowa House and Senate can't agree on how much to increase public school state funding. The Iowa Senate passed a 2% increase. And the Iowa House wants a 2.25% increase plus more than $22 million for rural districts specifically. Meanwhile, state Democrats are pushing for a 5% increase, saying the GOP's plans will lead to cuts in programs, staffing, and extracurriculars. Joining us now with what else has been going on in Des Moines is Dana Searles of our sister station, WOI. Dana, let's start with the House. Last week, Iowa representatives passed a bill that's all about physicians. It's now all the way over in the Senate. What's this one about?
Yeah, so this is something that lawmakers really want to address, the physician shortage across the state. So it did see a little bit of bipartisan support. It ultimately passed out of the House in a vote of 67 to 28. But what the bill would essentially do is for the University of Iowa's College of Dentistry, Nursing, or Medicine, it must have at least 80% of its students be Iowa residents or were Iowa residents before applying. So now the lawmakers that want to see this happen and want this to go through, they think it would be really good for just bolstering and uplifting students in the state. But then those against argue that this may make Iowa a little bit less competitive. They fear that it just wouldn't have as much opportunities for students out of state to come in and work together with those. So ultimately that did pass out of the House and it's on its way to the Senate. So it's kind of a bare bones bill.
And we should point out that right now about 70% of students at that school would be Iowa residents. So lawmakers want to bump that up another 10%. But a new report out last week from the legislative capitol says that $5.6 million could be lost by the university because that's out-of-state tuition, which is higher, that they might be losing going forward. What did lawmakers have to say about that?
So I think that was kind of the pushback on it a little bit, is essentially if they're from the state, they are much more likely to stay in the state. But if they're coming from out of state, they're a lot more likely to go out of state. However, those against, kind of like you mentioned and like I said earlier, it just would maybe not be as competitive because there maybe wouldn't be as many opportunities for students from out of state to come into the state.
Well, another bill that passed the Iowa House last week as well passed with an overwhelming majority. How would this one impact court cases in Iowa?
They want it to be where minors wouldn't have to face their abusers in court. So basically, just to kind of help there be a better barrier if it were to come where somebody would have to testify against their abuser. So what it would be was a two-way closed circuit system where somebody testifying would be able to be in a different room than whoever the defendant is on trial on that case, where they would be able to hear each other and see each other, but they would be in separate rooms.
Yeah, and this one is interesting for a bunch of reasons. One is there are arguments that this might actually require a constitutional amendment to change this law in Iowa. Some argue that the bill that's passing through the House and Senate is enough, so we'll wait and see what happens there. But quickly hopping over to the Senate, what are lawmakers working on when it comes to preschoolers across Iowa?
Yeah, so this is a bill that was introduced by Governor Kim Reynolds earlier in the session. She laid it out in her condition of the state. Originally, we're talking about it because it was brought up to be eligible for debate on the debate calendar in the Senate earlier in the week. However, we ultimately did not see it be debated, and it has been since taken off of the debate calendar. So don't really know exactly where it stands right now, but it is eligible for debate in the Senate. But what this bill would essentially do is just kind of incentivize a relationship better with child care centers and preschools. So it would be a $16 million grant that would go to child care centers and preschools in order to help provide full-day daycare, full-day preschools. It would also allow child care workers to have free access to preschools and child care across the state. And it's something that really Governor Kim Reynolds wants to just be able to really bridge that gap and improve our child care and, take the burden off of parents. Some may be difficult to transport their kids to and from school or to and from preschool in the middle of the day. So this would be to incentivize a full day program so parents don't have to worry about driving in the middle of the workday or finding that second half of the day. And then you're getting your child care and your preschool in the same time or in the same partnership. So it would basically make it a little bit more, those preschoolers and child care centers would be just improving quality of it overall. So kind of a lot there, but essentially it would do three things: was just to kind of help take the burden off of parents, improve child care across the state, and just having more opportunities for kids in preschool and child care centers.
Dana, as always, thank you for your time today. And for you guys at home, we've compiled our political coverage for both sides of the river on WQAD.com. Just click on the As Seen on TV tab at the top of the homepage.